Today, I want to share with you my picks for the best 3 video camera setups for churches in 2020. Each of these 3 kits will capture stunning video. One can even shoot great photos as well, but no camera body is perfect. So stick around, and by the end, you'll know what makes each of these 3 cameras special, but I'll also explain their weaknesses as well. Well, hey there, I'm Brady Shearer from Pro Church Tools, and if we are just meeting for the very first time, this channel is all about helping you and your church navigate the biggest communication shift in 500 years. So please consider subscribing to this channel. You can hit the little church bell to turn on notifications, and we publish new videos every Tuesday and Thursday of each week. And if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. Now, the first camera that I want to dive into is the Blackmagic Ursa Mini Pro. I get a lot of questions from churches about video cameras that can serve multiple functions. Namely, is there a camera that has what I need for live production and streaming, but can also capture cinematic footage? And if that's what you need most, that kind of hybrid solution, this is one of the very few cameras that can do both exceptionally well. Taking directly from Blackmagic Design's website, they say the Ursa Mini Pro is a professional digital film camera that combines incredible 4.6K image quality with the features and controls of a traditional broadcast camera. So for live streaming, it's got a 12G SGI connection, and you can shoot HD and Ultra HD resolution all the way up to 60 frames per second. And then you can rig it out with an external display connected to an ATEM switcher for remote camera control, talkback, LANC, etc. So at my church, we've begun transitioning to Ursa Mini Pros for our live streaming and iMag, but that's not all that we use them for, because while the Ursa Mini Pro does excel in a live production setting, it's first and foremost a cinema camera. So for testimony videos, talking head, sermon bumpers, and really any kind of B-roll, the Ursa Mini Pro captures stunning cinematic footage. It's got 15 stops of dynamic range, a variety of different lens mounts that you can choose from when you purchase the camera. It's the only camera that I'll be talking about in this video with built-in ND filters, which are so convenient when you're on the run shooting footage and the light is changing. It shoots up to 4.6K resolution, great color science. It can shoot windowed 4K at 150 frames per second, windowed 1080 at 300 for that ultra slow-mo look, professional level video codecs like the new Blackmagic RAW, along with Apple ProRes. The bottom line is this: if you're looking for a hybrid camera that can do both live production, but also shoot beautiful 4K cinematic footage, it's hard to find a better option than the Blackmagic Ursa Mini Pro. But now, let's also talk about some of the challenges shooting with this camera. Firstly, it's the most expensive camera in this group of 3. The body alone is about $6,000, and then you need to consider storage and power and accessories. The Ursa Mini Pro, it's powered by V-mount batteries. These are going to cost you about $200 to $400 a piece. And then, even though you can use SD cards with this camera, you'll probably want to use CFast cards instead to unlock its full potential. And each of those cards is about $500. Now, of course, these are just rough estimates, but all in, to get this camera recording, you're probably looking at about $10,000. And that's just having it rigged out for cinematic shooting, not live production. The other thing to consider is that this camera is a professional level camera, so it's not going to have some of the features that you may expect to find in a quality DSLR or mirrorless option. So that means no autofocus, there's no built-in image stabilization, and it's also, quite obviously, bigger and heavier than the other cameras that we're going to talk about. So it's not as easy to shoot run and gun handheld, and the size draws attention to itself. So if you're looking for a more stealth, understated camera configuration, this may not be the one for you. And then when it comes to lenses, we've had great success pairing the Ursa Mini Pro with the Rokinon Cine DS series of lenses for all of our cinematic shoots. They're affordable, high quality, but probably not what you want for live production. To conclude, here's my one-sentence summary of the Blackmagic Ursa Mini Pro. This camera excels in ways that very few cameras can. It's an excellent solution for both cinematic and live production environments. But with that versatility and added functionality comes extra expense, bulk, and a need for additional accessories. So what do you do if you love the cinematic image that the Ursa Mini Pro produces, but it's a bit too expensive or bulky? Well, you might want to look to camera number 2 on our list, which is the Blackmagic Pocket Cinema Camera 4K. Now, I named this the ultimate church video camera setup for 2019, and it is an absolute beast of a camera considering its smaller form factor. Now, I'll get this out of the way from the jump. This camera, it's not a realistic option for live production or streaming, but what makes this camera special is that in a body similar in size to a DSLR, you get a full-fledged cinema camera. 13 stops of dynamic range, pro codecs like Blackmagic RAW and Apple ProRes, great color science. It shoots 4K up to 120 frames per second in 1080 HD, and similar to the Ursa Mini Pro, it records to SD and CFast cards, and you get all that in an extremely compact camera body. And the form factor matters here, at least it did for us, because when we started shooting more with the Pocket 4K and less with our Ursa Mini Pro, things just became easier. And we generally shoot a lot of run and gun type footage, and so putting the 4K on a stabilizer was so much easier than the Ursa. Traveling with the Pocket 4K, much easier. Shooting footage in the church sanctuary or lobby or around the city, again, much easier with the Pocket 4K because it just looks like you're taking a photo with a DSLR and you're not drawing as much attention to yourself with a giant broadcast camera. And then the cost, so much more approachable. The camera body itself is about $1,300 and it doesn't require as many expensive accessories as the Ursa Mini Pro does. As for its weaknesses, again, not suited for live production. So if that's a primary need for your church, this probably isn't the main camera to consider. And, similar to the Ursa Mini Pro, there's no reliable ongoing autofocus here, and again, no image stabilization. Well, let's talk lens options now. For the Ursa Mini Pro, we have about a dozen lenses that we bring with us when we shoot with this camera. But for the Pocket 4K, for us, it's all about being lean with our setup, so we really only use one lens with this camera body, and that is the Tamron 24-70mm f2.8. And then we've got a Metabones Ultra Speed Booster to connect that lens to the Pocket 4K camera body. And this accomplishes a couple of things. Firstly, while the Pocket 4K does not have internal image stabilization in the camera itself, the Tamron lens does, and it makes shooting handheld a dream. And then secondly, by using the speed booster, that's going to give us an extra stop or so of aperture on the lens, and it compensates a bit for the cropped sensor of the Pocket 4K. One more thing about this camera. Blackmagic has launched a sequel to the Pocket 4K. It's the Blackmagic Pocket Cinema 6K, that's right. And that comes with Super 35 sensor instead of a 4/3 sensor, and of course the added resolution of 6K over 4K. Now, the camera body of the 6K, it does cost twice as much as the 4K right here. So for us, it wasn't worth the upgrade, but something to consider perhaps. To conclude, my one-sentence summary of the Blackmagic Pocket Cinema Camera 4K, for churches that don't need live production or streaming, the Pocket 4K is really the ultimate camera body for capturing cinematic footage affordably and in a small, compact form factor. And that brings us to the final camera on this list, the Canon EOS R, the newest camera to our collection and Canon's first full-frame mirrorless offering. And I absolutely love this camera, but it is very different than the preceding two cameras that we've discussed. Primarily, this camera, again, not suited for live production or streaming, but also, nor is it a professional cinema camera. But it is my favorite camera currently for social media videos. That means YouTube, Instagram, IGTV, Instagram stories, Facebook and Facebook stories, vlogging, TikTok, and it goes on and on. All of social media video, this is our go-to. And the more that we began creating video content specifically for social, the more we realized that the Pocket 4K and the Ursa Mini Pro cameras that we were using were just too cumbersome. The workflow was too laborious because when it comes to social, we need fast turnaround times. We want our footage to look beautiful, of course, but we don't need 4K, and we don't need 10-bit, we don't need RAW, we don't even really need ProRes codecs. We need a camera that we can basically just point and shoot and capture something that looks outstanding regardless of the surrounding environment. We don't really want to do a ton of setup. So what makes the EOS R the right tool for the job? Well, number one, it's a full-frame sensor, and this means that it's easier to achieve a shallow depth of field, it performs better in low light, and it has a wider field of view, allowing for more versatility in our framing. Number two, it comes with Canon's world-famous color science and autofocus, so for vlogging on the go, for Instagram stories running around the office, the autofocus is a must for ensuring that we don't miss out on special moments as they happen. And then, even though this doesn't have pro-level codecs, it does come with C-Log, and the camera has impressive dynamic range. And frankly, after shooting with pro-level cinema cameras for a couple of years almost exclusively, it was very refreshing coming back to a camera body like the EOS R that just does a lot of stuff for me so I don't have to think about it myself when I'm shooting. The EOS R is also the only camera in this group of three that shoots photos. So if you're looking for a camera that can shoot stunning video and capture great photos at your church, this might be the camera for you. And for just about $1,800 for the camera body, it's tough to beat. Very affordable and very economical. When it comes to weaknesses, this camera does not have, again, like the other two, built-in image stabilization. And now we'll get to that in a moment with lens choices. It also doesn't shoot 4K in full frame. 4K is available in this camera, but it's cropped. And perhaps the greatest paradox of this camera is that despite the specs not blowing you away on paper, once you start shooting with this camera, it's hard not to fall in love with it. It excels in virtually every area, but it's not masterful in any. But for social media video, that's exactly what I want. Let's talk lenses now. Another current area of weakness for the EOS R is the lack of native lens options, because Canon hasn't traditionally produced a ton of mirrorless cameras, so they naturally don't have as many lens options for those sensors. But within the limited line of RF Canon lenses, we have found our dream setup, and that is pairing the EOS R with the Canon RF 15 to 35mm f2.8 image stabilized lens. It has superb image stabilization, this lens does, which, again, the body of the camera doesn't. And this was a must for us. If we're getting a camera for social, it needs image stabilization, and this lens solved that. And then both the aperture and variable focal length on the zoom ensure that we can capture great shallow depth of field in super wide shots. We can also zoom in when necessary. And this setup has allowed us to shoot vertical video natively for stories and TikTok with creative and unusual framing on the super wide side of the spectrum. But of course, it's also great for horizontal video, and we've even begun experimenting with using this camera for our long-form studio shoots, connecting it to an Atomos Ninja V to bypass the internal recording limits and unlock 10-bit 422, which again, can't be recorded internally with this camera, but is possible with an external recorder. To summarize, my one-sentence breakdown of the Canon EOS R. For all types of social media video and for photography, the Canon EOS R is the ideal solution for churches. It captures outstanding footage and shots conveniently, though it does need to be paired with an image-stabilized lens to make it truly shine. To conclude, there is no perfect camera body, so it's important to understand your church's needs, budget, and importantly, what you're okay to sacrifice on. Each of these three cameras has served us exceptionally well, but each comes with its own challenges also. And of course, a camera body is just a tool. The person behind the camera is always the thing that matters most. Again, if you liked this video, consider subscribing and make sure to hit the thumbs up. Really appreciate your time. Thanks for watching.